From Bowl Season Radio, this is the East-West Shrine Bowl Countdown on Sirius XM. From the Shrine Bowl Hall of Fame dinner at Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas, here is your host, Mike Yam.
Certainly excited and thrilled. It is the 100th anniversary of the East-West Shrine Bowl. Joseph Fuente with me for the next hour. We will hear from Michelle Montaine coming up in just a bit as we get a better sense of both the East and the West squads. And, Coach, you know, I think about your experience last couple days around some of these players. I think about the coaching staff. You know, we're about 24 hours away from kickoff of this game. I can't imagine the coaches, the players, everyone's got to be a little juiced up for an exciting time, and really players that are auditioning for their NFL lives.
Yeah, you get to the point where everybody's just tired of practice. You know, like you're just ready to go play the game. And they've had a great week of preparation. It's been a cool atmosphere, a great setup here that has allowed these guys to digest this information as quickly as possible. And now they're just into the mental preparation, getting their bodies feeling good, getting ready to go out there and play fast.
Yeah, there's a slew of players, and this is typically what happens. I wasn't at this game. I know, Coach, last year you were. 2 years ago when it was in Vegas, I was a part of the broadcast on NFL Network, and you see how agents sometimes get involved with personnel decisions, right? Where you get some guys that have a good week of practice and all of a sudden maybe just aren't going to play. That's going to happen in this game. That happens for all of these all-star games, including the Senior Bowl. I got to imagine, though, when you're one of those guys, you're fighting the competitive juices that say, yo, let's go. I want to show that I can ball out against this competition. And then there's the part of you that says, well, this is also now a business.
Yeah, there's so much money in professional sports in today's day and age, and in some of collegiate sports, that you kind of get it. You know, you understand that there comes a point in time when you've got to shut it down, even though you know you would rather go play.
Sure.
And you know, these guys have responsibilities. They have families and you know, people that are depending on them to make great decisions and take care of themselves. And football is a dangerous sport, and you cannot mitigate all of the risk, no matter what you do. But if given the opportunity to mitigate some of the risk, you understand why guys may opt to not play, even though they want to play, and they would prefer to be out there performing.
There's so much hype around the players, and I think you're probably the perfect person to speak to this. You know, yesterday ahead of the game, I got an opportunity to talk to, you know, the coordinators, the head coaches of both of these teams. And for those who don't know and are going to be listening to this game on Sirius XM Channel 84 and 88, you're going to hear some coaches' names that you're used to hearing on the NFL side, but they're coordinators. Everyone is leveling up now as in a role that they aspire to be. What's that like for these guys? And by the way, some of these coaches are on teams that have new coaching staff, so like they don't even know if they're going to have gigs when it comes to their regular, experience and their regular day jobs. I can imagine there's a lot of anxiety surrounding what they can do and what they can show and network.
Well, it's a really cool opportunity,
sure,
you know, for some of these younger guys to take on some more responsibility. You know, we're all human, and we've all sat in a meeting room and watched the leader of that unit give a presentation or talk, and we've sat there and thought, man, when I get my chance to do it, I'm going to do it this way. Yeah. Or I really like the way he did that, but I think I would tweak it like this. Well, this is an opportunity for a dress rehearsal of those roles, and you get a chance as a coach to take on a little more responsibility. There's something inherently personal when you're in charge, and when you're a play caller and you call a play and it doesn't go well, it hurts you in your soul. You know, it's very personal. It's a part of you going out there with each one of those calls. And these guys are getting a chance to take on those new roles, whether it's as a head coach or a coordinator or coaching a position group. And, you know, when I was a head coach years ago, like we would try and do some of these things like in spring practice. We would try and let a GA call a segment of a game, of a scrimmage, or let guys kind of step up into new roles for small pieces of time. But this is another level of that rehearsal, and it doesn't count against your record, right? So you get a chance to be a head coach, and when you walk out of here, if you win, you tell everybody you're 1-0, and if you don't win, you don't even mention that you're 0-1.
It's fascinating. A couple of years ago when I did this game, Marquise Williams, who's going to be coaching this East team, was actually the coach of that squad. So I kind of joked with him during the week. I was like, man, this is like kind of an OG to this experience, right? And you're right, it's not a normal game. It's an all-star game. And I think the difference just listening to him 2 years ago compared to what I heard yesterday ahead of those coaches meetings was an understanding of what that experience was and how it's shaping him for this one. He said, look, I was able to take my notes. I was able to pass those notes to some of my coaches. I'm a special teams guy for the Atlanta Falcons. Darren Bates, who works with the Carolina Panthers. You can sort of see like this proud papa moment, right? He's like, hey, I had Darren as a player. Had Darren, obviously, working with him now. And he wants to lift those guys up. So when you say, hey, when I was a coach, I gave some GAs some of those opportunities, you're kind of sensing that from both of these staffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to do it more than once is a pretty unique advantage in terms of, these coaches, they all do, and to steal a term from the military, an after-action report. They all sit down and go over everything they've done, whether it's in fall camp or whether it's a game, and they evaluate very honestly what they liked, what they didn't like, what mistakes they made, so on and so forth. And I'm sure they do that with this game too. Sure. when you're going through it for the second time, you can go back through your notes and say, these are the things I wish I hadn't done. This is what I wish I had done, and how it all worked out. And it's just a cool. Much is made about the opportunity for the players, and that is what it's ultimately about. But behind the scenes, it's a really neat opportunity for some young guys to take on some new responsibility.
Yeah, just to kind of set the table for some of those folks. And on the west side of things, our reporter, Michelle Montaine, actually got an opportunity to talk to Shane Bowen, who's the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. We will hear that interview coming up in about 10 minutes' time here on SiriusXM Channel 84. It is the Shrine Bowl Countdown. Coach, because you got to evaluate some of these players and see some of these storylines, I know there's so much buzz around the quarterbacks. A little bit later in the show, I want to get your take on some of your favorite stories, but because there's so much attention on QB1, and I think about the teams that are picking in the top 10. A year ago in the draft, we had this historic run of QBs taken in the first 12 picks. I don't think we get that this year, but the reality is there's probably anywhere from, let's call it 6 to 8 teams picking in that top 10 that could be thinking about QB1. I don't know if it's going to the draft and maybe it's free agency, but in terms of what you've seen the last couple days at practice, is there a quarterback that you think, maybe not a top 10 guy, but maybe shoots his way into the first round?
Well, I think it's interesting because, the year Tom Brady came out, everybody said it was a terrible quarterback class. But yet there was a Hall of Fame quarterback in the class. He just wasn't a Hall of Famer as a senior in college, And almost every year, somebody drafts a quarterback later in the draft, puts him on the bench, and he becomes a productive player.
Sure.
When it doesn't happen all the time, but they're out there is my point. And the grading scale for quarterbacks is completely different than every other position. Obviously, it's need-based, it's franchise-changing, it's the face of your program. However, when you can slide in there in the fourth round and take one and put him to the side and let him develop and let him work, sometimes that's an advantage. I think, and we'll see how this ultimately plays out, but according to the experts, it's not a great quarterback class this year. But I still think there's going to be starters in the NFL, productive pros that come out of this class. I think,
by the way, before you get there, I do want to point out, Brock Purdy was the last pick, and obviously a ton made. He played in the East-West Shrine Bowl,
Yeah,
right?
He sure did. His picture's everywhere.
100%. So I think to your point, the talent evaluation process when it comes to quarterback, it's not a science, right? Like there's clearly some misses, there's clearly some hits, and in that same class, you saw Trey Lance, who came from North Dakota State. We got a North Dakota State quarterback in Cam Miller, who's won a ton of games. I'll get you on him in just a moment, but I think it speaks to what you're describing. Like, it might not be the first overall pick, it might be the second overall pick, but you might get a guy later in that first round, or the second round, third round, or the last pick in the draft that can ball out. And I know to your point, Kyle McCord has felt like one of those dudes who's gotten a lot of draft buzz.
I just watch him play, and he's got the makeup. He can throw. He has a big time arm. He's got great size. He played in a system the last year at Syracuse that basically disregarded the run and said, we're going to throw it almost every down, and that's a lot to carry for a quarterback. And while when he gets into camp, the offenses he runs, wherever he's at, won't exactly look like that. I still think there's value in all of those live reps. And when I watch him practice, I see the location of the ball. I see his ability to deliver the ball to all parts of the field. And I think that's a guy that piques your interest if you're interested in taking a quarterback.
Yeah, the numbers at Syracuse, we had him during the season I worked for the CW. We had the ACC. I saw him play multiple times. Jackson Meeks, one of the wide receivers who'll be playing in this game, another big-time playmaker. McCord, though, I mean, it looked like video game numbers out there. The amount of times that he threw, school record in terms of, yardage and attempts, they weren't shy. Now, I think there were some concerns about decision-making, but I'd also push back, and you know this, Coach, sometimes when you're throwing it 300 times in a season, you're going to throw some picks.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness, like when you never turn around and hand it off and just watch the running back run, and that weight is on you every single time, that's part of it.
Sure.
Those aren't excuses. That's just the reality of, when you're going to throw it that many times, it's going to be difficult to always make great decisions. And, playing quarterback is difficult. If you could figure it all out, like you could make a whole lot of money if you could identify them and you could hit at 80%. They would pay, every NFL team in America would pay you a whole lot of money. But he just has a skill set that I think is conducive to having a shot in the NFL.
Accuracy certainly helps. I name-checked North Dakota State. Cam Miller, another player on this East roster. I had an opportunity to talk to his coach, Tim Polasek, who, by the way, is just old-school offensive line thinking. The way he described him, and I think there's always concern when you talk about FCS players. Can they thrive? Carson Wentz is a guy that obviously went there. Trey Lance, another player, Easton Stick. Polasek told me, hey, the preparation is like Carson. It's like Easton Stick. The big games that we're talking about, a guy that has won 2 national championships, 55 career starts, there's a lot of parallels. NFL quarterbacks who have success and the amount of reps, more specifically the amount of starts in college. Talking to the coaching staff and Marquise Williams, the head coach of this East squad, raved about his ability to have a lot of command. I think there's some questions about, the arm, but if you want a guy that can just lead plays, Cam Miller could be a late-round pick in this draft.
No, I agree with everything you said. There's no substitute for experience.
Yeah.
And, you see guys, sometimes they have so much talent it can overcome experience. But you playing in big games, checking things at the line of scrimmage, being in pressure situations, playing from under the center the way Cam has played. He's played from the gun. He's played under center, which they're going to ask him to do in the NFL. And he's made improvements as a passer. He's always been a good athlete. He doesn't have the huge stature, but, like a lot of the guys in the NFL don't anymore too. Like some of them are the big, huge, burly guys, but some of them are small. And, they're still having success because they've got some mobility. They can move around and make plays on the run, and Cam's one of those guys.
Okay, I do want to get your take on some of the West quarterbacks as well, but speaking of that team, their head coach Shane Bowen is leading the charge, really defensive guy, the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants. Coming up next on the Shrine Bowl Countdown, we go one-on-one. Our reporter Michelle Montaine catching up with the DC, now HC. That's coming up next here on Sirius XM, Channel 84.
If your child experiences a burn, Shriners Children's is here with world-renowned burn care. The same doctors who innovate procedures for the most serious burn cases are ready with the most advanced treatments for pediatric burn injuries, no matter the degree. Best of all, our care is provided regardless of a family's ability to pay or insurance status. Visit us at shrinerschildrens.org to see why we're the place to turn for any burn. Shriners Children's, the most amazing care anywhere.
Now, back to the East-West Shrine Bowl Countdown.
All right, back here on Sirius XM, Channel 84. Let's not forget this game broadcast coming up 8 Eastern time on 84, as well as NFL Radio, Channel 88. We have had an opportunity, Coach, to talk about heavily what's happening on this East roster, but Michelle Montaine joins us right now. Look, you've had an opportunity. I know you're going to be covering that East sideline, so I know you got stories abundant, but there's nothing cooler than talking to some of these head coaches. Coach and I talked about guys leveling up, and that is certainly the case for Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator for the Giants.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you guys touched on this. This week of an experience overall is so different than anything else these coaches are put into. I mean, you're given a roster full of guys that don't really know each other, and you're trying to install an entirely new game plan in a number of days, right? So a unique experience. I got to catch up with him on that, as well as one of the main messages that he's hoping to drive home with these guys during this week.
Coach, now that it's, almost game time, what are you most, proud of in terms of what the guys have been able to accomplish while the week's gone?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, they've all treated it like a job interview. Like they've came in, it's a week-long job interview. We talked about it early on in the week. You've seen progress from a learning, from a practice standpoint. They've been pros. I'm excited to see them go out there tomorrow and compete. Like it's a great opportunity for all these guys to go put some more stuff on tape for these teams to evaluate. And I think they're going to go out there and compete and play hard and challenge guys and attack and all those things we've talked about all week.
What has been the biggest challenge of doing a whole install with all these guys who never played together, and you have such a short amount of time to do it?
Yeah, I mean, the game helps because they limit the rules, what you're able to do, so that definitely helps us. I'm sure if Eggs had it his way or OC had it his way, they would be throwing the whole book at them. So that's helped, but again, I think the biggest thing for all these guys, and it will be no different when they get to the league, is just the terminology, right? Being able to relate terminology from what they've done to how we call things, and it's a quick, obviously, process to get that done in a week. But I think they've handled it well for the most part, and again, try not to do too much where we paralyze them before the snap. In a perfect world, let's do what we can as a coaching staff to get them lined up where they can go show their ability.
As the head coach, if there was just, one thing that you hope these guys take away, like the one message you were trying to drive home throughout this experience, what would that be?
That you got to earn it every day. Like that's what the NFL is going to be. No matter what your role is, try to excel in it and earn more opportunity with whatever comes. Special teams being a big part of that as you get into the league as well. But earn it every day. Like the NFL is always looking for younger, cheaper, whether you're year 10, whether you're year 5, whatever that might be. So continue to work, and when you get your opportunities, go out there and compete.
And we'd be remiss to not talk about the Shriners aspect of all of this. What's been your favorite part of watching these guys have the impact they do on the patients?
Yeah, I think just seeing them out there this morning, right, with the patients, playing those games, talking, signing autographs. Again, I speak for our whole coaching staff when I say this. I think we're all privileged and honored to be a part of such a great cause, and for it to be the 100th year of the game, like incredible history, and again, just excited for what this game's able to do for young kids and in the hospitals. And the players have been great. I think they understand what it is too, the importance of it, and are taking pride in it.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
It was so interesting hearing from him because it felt like a lot of the things that he was preaching that he's been trying to drive home with the players also applies to him and this coaching staff. You guys have touched on it, but this is kind of a showcase game, not just for the players, but for these coaches. And it felt like he was really taking that to heart and is obviously trying to do his best to show what he can do as a head coach.
Yeah. What'd you make of what he was doing on the practice field the last couple of days?
Oh, I thought it was awesome. They were focused and organized and intent on getting it taught. And, the fun thing about these practices, too, is you don't have, 30 minutes of individual period. Like, you're not having to run over bags and you just put the ball down and go play.
Sure.
You install the stuff, walk through it, and then you get, like everybody loves team drill. Like, you get to go play football. And quite a bit of it is team, some of it's situational. But they've done a great job getting these guys ready.
It was funny in our coaches meetings, I kind of what I do when I set them up, it's, all right, take me through kind of the personnel. We'll start with the quarterbacks, and very short, quick answers from a defensive coordinator. He was very eager to let his offensive staff kind of live up some of these guys. But I'm curious your take. Brady Cook, you and I talked off air. The Missouri quarterback, we'll see him out there. Max Brosmer out of Minnesota, talked to his coach, PJ Fleck, who was in the building on Tuesday this week. Mario Cristobal, by the way, at Miami, was also in the building to watch a couple of his guys. We won't see all of those Miami players, some of them, especially at the wide receiver spot, pulling out. And then I'll throw Ethan Garber's name into the mix, UCLA quarterback, who's basically filling in for Shedeur Sanders, who's kind of the headliner, not necessarily playing. What did you make, just setting the stage here, what did you make of what you saw at QB 1, 2, and 3?
Well, I liked what I saw from all three of the guys that took a lion's share of the reps. It's interesting. I know a little bit about Brady Cook just because I know some guys on the staff at Missouri. And, one of the coaches, I was on the phone with him the other day, and he just said that this is one of the best young men I've ever been around. I'd let him date both of my daughters. That's what he said. So, I mean, he just really –
Not at the same time, just
really,
for clarification
he was
purposes,
just trying to he was trying to paint the picture of how complimentary he was of Brady and just what he's meant to the Missouri football program. Ethan Garbers is interesting because of what he's been doing offensively this past year. In terms of like truly running an NFL style offense with
Eric Bieniemy over there as their offensive coordinator. I mean, just the verbiage that's being thrown out there, 17-word play calls. We actually got some of those play calls. I don't know how these quarterbacks do it.
Yeah, you're essentially telling everybody exactly what to do.
Yeah.
And they can be very verbose. And, in most colleges are trying to make them as short as possible and asking guys to just memorize 1 or 2 word play calls that have some word association to them. But when you have to get in there with a bunch of adults, grown men, that have been playing football for a living for 5 years and tell them all what to do, that's a whole lot different than shouting out 2 code words. And, I think he's going to be probably a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to that when he gets into camp.
So what you're saying is, Coach, turning around with the stick or the finger in the dirt and drawing up the play, that's not what we expect to see on NFL Sundays or certainly in the East-West Shrine.
No, I don't think so. I think you'll see a bunch of check with me's just from what I saw at practice, and I think the quarterbacks have handled it pretty well. And of course, they're pared down a little bit on defense, so it makes it a little bit easier. But I think you'll see a bunch of 2-play calls out there and guys running the show.
Only other thing that I would add about Max Brosmer, I made reference to my conversation with PJ Fleck. I talked to Max after one of the practices. There is a maturity level. We can love up some guys, and we'll talk about some of our favorite stories. FCS players who then level up, and that could be leveling up to the NFL or just to Power 5 football. And that was the case with Max, New Hampshire kid. I said, hey man, how does that path help you? And I thought it was fascinating. He said, well, I love football. He said, we didn't have an indoor, we didn't have all the bells and whistles. I get to Minnesota and I am so appreciative of all those things. And when I asked Coach Fleck, I just said, hey, I say, Max, what do you think of? And he paused and just started smiling because it's one of the most coachable kids I have ever had, and he loves football. In a very short period of time, the coaches on that West squad, they found themselves really enjoying that time and understanding, hey, this dude can walk into an NFL building and it doesn't feel like it's going to be too big for him in terms of the preparation.
Well, that's a huge feather in his cap because it is a different world. You're walking into a locker room and you're expected to you may not be in charge of the whole locker room, but you are expected to lead. And the quarterback gets too much blame when things don't go well, and he gets too much credit when things do go well, and that just comes with the job if you don't like it.
Same with coaches too, right?
Yeah, well, that's just the way it is. And if you don't like it, then you need to find another occupation. But that's going to do nothing but play favors for him as he moves through his career.
Yeah, a little bit earlier we heard from Shane Bowen, the head coach of the West Squad, who's the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. Michelle Montaine had an opportunity to catch up with him, and I thought one of the really significant questions was at the end about Shriners and the hospital and the impact that this game has on a lot of children. Coming up next, we'll dive deeper into that. It's the Shrine Bowl Countdown on Sirius XM, Channel 84.
If your child has a common orthopedic condition, that doesn't mean you can only get common treatments. You can choose Shriners Children's. Our world-class care is not limited to insurance networks or to what's been done before. The same doctors who innovate treatments for the most complicated orthopedic issues will help your child grow and develop properly. See what we do at shrinerschildrens.org. Shriners Children's, the most amazing care anywhere.
Now, back to the East-West Shrine Bowl Countdown.
Pumped for the actual game, all the build-up for days leading into a showcase where we expect to see, well, last year it was 57 players that played in the game that were drafted. A lot of talent evaluators feel like that number could be surpassed this year. The game, you can listen to all the play-by-play, SiriusXM channel 84 and 88. You will hear Michelle Montaine on the sidelines, roaming, catching up with everything that you need to know about that East squad. But, Michelle, one of the cool things about being involved throughout the course of the week on a game like this is you never know who you're going to actually find and get an opportunity to speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. And with this being the 100th edition of the game, there were some special people in attendance throughout the week. And I think there's actually, there's a really cool story behind the logo that the East-West Shrine Bowl uses. It was actually a real-life photo taken of one of the players and of one of the Shriners' patients. We hear from that player, Mike Esposito, who was here because of the 100th edition of this special game.
I know it's been a while, but what was your favorite memory from being involved in the East-West Shrine festivities, like the entire week?
Yeah, it's like everything else. You're a young kid, I want to go have a beer and, and stuff like that. And when it really struck, and you go to the game, and the reason there is to showcase your talents and stuff like that. And really, honestly, it helps out kids. And then when we had Nicole, when they showed Nicole as us as our patient, that's when it really hit. Goes, holy crap, this is what it's all about. It's about the babies, and that's what means a lot to me.
How do you describe the series of events that took place from the time you first saw her until the time that iconic photo was taken?
I've told the story many times, but I'll repeat it right here for you. We came in, she was sitting in her bed, and she was startled, all these big people, and especially when she seen my ugly face, it must have really scared her. So we walked up to her, and I tried to talk to her, and she wouldn't talk. I said to my wife, hon, she's scared. She goes, why don't we do this? So let's take her out for a walk and get her away from all this, and maybe that'll make her feel good. So I said, Nicole, you want to take a walk? And she goes, yeah. So I took a hand, my wife took the other hand, and we walked down the hall and go, say, how you doing? And she just nodded. She was 2. She was just happy to be away from it. And from that point on, it was just anything I can do to help any kid anywhere, I'll do the best I can for them.
How did you find out that that photo taken in that moment was going to be the symbol for this game for all the years to come?
We got a letter or something, I can't recall, and they mailed it to us, and we opened it up, and I went, holy crap, we're the symbol of the game. Really, that's what happened. It wasn't like, they told us this, they just did it and sent it to us. They said, oh, look at this. And that's how it happened.
After this game, you went on to play a couple, seasons in the NFL. Now that you're back on this 100th edition of the game and around these kids, what's been your message to some of these players that were probably at the same time wanting just to drink a beer?
I haven't had the opportunities to talk to the kids, but I'm looking at them and I can see in their faces they're going, oh my God, I got to do this. All I want to do is play the game. And that's just being a kid.
Yeah.
That's being a kid. Will they in time, if they haven't already, and they might have, understand the importance of what they're doing.
When you first were reunited with Nicole, what were the first things you said to her?
Oh, you're so pretty still. She is.
And how is it being back here reunited with someone whose, life you changed?
Really, when we seen each other in the lobby today, it's like I seen her yesterday. Really was. It's that connection. It's so genuine, so honest. It doesn't happen too often with people, but this really did.
And last one, just the whole mission of Shriners and the fact that they put on this game every year to raise money for these kids. How has that changed your life personally?
What it changes, I donate to the Shriners, honestly, and I change to St. Jude's. I have a collection of, if it helps kids, I donate. That's what I do. And this here, well, first is the most important to me to donate. But, yeah, it's all about kids, especially as I get older. And you cherish the youth of these kids and what they're going to have to live with. And these kids, I mean, they're already starting out life in a handicap. So anything we can do to make it better, in my opinion, is what I want to do.
Mike told me that it had been decades since he last was reunited with Nicole. He mentioned there being reunited in the lobby, and it seemed like no time had passed at all. That was the same sentiment that we got from Nicole, who we also caught up with ahead of tomorrow's game.
The 100th edition of the East West Shrine Bowl, and you get to come back here. What does it mean to be back here?
It's insane. First and foremost, it's amazing. It's an honor. There's so many emotions going on right now. It's crazy.
How did you find out that a picture that you were involved in was going to be the icon for the game for all the years to come?
My mom, she was an amazing, she photographed literally everything. She has all the memorabilia. And then I remember I was 10 years old and she sat me down. She's like, have some cereal. I'm like, all right. And then she has this milk carton and she puts it right in front of me and I'm like, de-doop, de-doop. And I'm eating cereal. She's like, what's on the back of this carton? I'm like, Mom, I don't know. And she's like, look at the back of the carton. And it was a picture of me and Mike, the logo, on the back of a milk carton. And so I was like, holy, that was insane. So,
what does it mean to you for that to be the photo that represents the mission of this bowl game?
It's an honor. I'm a special ed teacher, and so what Mike has taught me about the picture, I use it with my students, and when they come in overwhelmed, we walk them in the hallway as well to kind of put them at ease and more comfortable.
I know you were so young when that event occurred, but what, if anything, do you remember about that whole experience when the players came?
I actually don't remember that one, but I do remember, and I actually have pictures of, every year the football players would come to the hospital, and so they would invite me to come back year after year, and I have several different pictures with different football players and whatnot. So I don't remember when I was 2, but I remember after that.
How did you find out the story about how it all went down when you were basically overwhelmed by all these players and then Mike decided to take you to the hallway? Who told you that story?
Actually, Mike did. And he told me it wasn't his idea, that it was actually his wife's idea. I'm like, yeah, a woman would have to do that. So, yeah. So, so I'm forever indebted.
So you find out that the story behind it, and now that you have been around these players, obviously you were around them all the times that they would come back, as a beneficiary of this mission, how important is it that the players continue to do something like this?
It's huge. It's definitely important. It brings awareness. And the more aware that people are, and it shows that other kids are just, the kids that are Shriners patients, we're just human. We just want to have fun. We want to laugh. The girls like the boys like, and vice versa. We like to put our makeup on. We like to laugh. Just to be included and to be seen instead of pushed to the sidelines and not to be seen.
Do you watch the game every year?
I'm not a football fan. I'm not a football fan. So, no, I'm embarrassed to say.
No, it's okay. I understand that your son, or one of your sons is also a Shriners patient. Has he had similar interactions with the guys?
Not the football game, no. But he did have the same surgeon and the same nurse and the same anesthesiologist, so that definitely, as a parent's perspective, put me at ease, because I knew my son was in great hands. As a parent, when your child has to go in for surgery, your heart just sinks. And when I knew that it was the same surgeon and the same nurse, I was okay. When we walked through the halls of Shriners and the nurse saw me, she recognized me, and she ran down the hall, and she's like, Coco, Coco. I'm like, oh, I don't go by Coco anymore. But she took amazing care of my son. So I would be forever indebted to all of the people at Shriners.
You mentioned not being a football fan, which that is the case for tons of people out there. And I guess my last question for you is just knowing that, this game goes beyond just football, and it goes beyond just seeing these patients as exactly that. How important is it that an effort like this continues on for years to come?
It's huge. Their mission is amazing. And for it to continue and to bring light and to bring awareness and to continue with that and is amazing. Like I see all the all the patients running around with footballs, getting the football signatures. Like they're going to remember that and they're going to have those footballs forever, just as I have my autographs 50 years later. Like that's going to be a part of their history.
Incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was so cool to hear Nicole's story and just her perspective of how much this game has touched her life and now her child's life.
Yeah, it's really wild because you talk about relationships and the fact that you're talking about a doctor and a nurse that remember all those years later. I mean, just the connection and the impact that we are seeing Shriners have on not only children but families in the long term. Really an honor and a privilege to be a part of what is going to be a really significant game, not just for the players but for the community that it impacts. Once again, all the play-by-play and the action to be able to catch it Thursday, 8 Eastern Time. You are listening to the Shrine Bowl Countdown on Sirius XM Channel 84. Coming up next, our favorite stories, the players that will pop not only on Thursday but on Sundays.
If your child experiences a burn, Shriners Children's is here with world-renowned burn care. The same doctors who innovate procedures for the most serious burn cases are ready with the most advanced treatments for pediatric burn injuries, no matter the degree. Best of all, our care is provided regardless of a family's ability to pay or insurance status. Visit us at shrinerschildrens.org to see why we're the place to turn for any burn. Shriners Children's, the most amazing care anywhere.
Now, back to the East-West Shrine Bowl Countdown.
Getting you set for the 100th edition of the East-West Shrine Bowl. 57 players drafted a year ago from this game. The expectation certainly to get more than that. And sometimes it's not just about the star power coming from Power 5 schools, and sometimes it is, but maybe lesser-known, heralded players. We spent a lot of time in the media, Coach, and it's probably a bad job by us, focusing on the wide receivers, as I led you there at the start of the show. But sometimes there's some great stories that emerge and guys that we should be paying attention to. This past week or so, as you're talking to players and scouts and using your own eyes, who are some of those guys that stood out to you?
Well, as we know, like the makeup of a football team is much more than the stars. There's a lot of people that, a lot of guys that play in the NFL that are not everyday names that play for a long time and make a good living. And, I think at this game this year, there's an offensive lineman from Lindenwood, Missouri, Gareth Warren. Lindenwood is an FCS school, like I said, in Missouri, and Gareth comes to us from Lindenwood via Hawaii. Okay, so I spoke to his head coach and said, how did you get to Hawaii to recruit this 6'6", 325-pound offensive lineman?
Family vacation.
And where can I sign up for those home visits to go over there and hang out for a week? But he said Gareth was a victim of COVID in terms of his season was canceled. So he played no senior high school year in Hawaii, but his brother was a rugby player at Lindenwood. And so Gareth sent some video of him lifting weights, running through ladders, doing some work, and lo and behold, the coaches at Lindenwood took a chance, and they said that he was 6'6", 320 when he walked in the door.
Whoa.
He's stayed the same weight, and I'm telling you, I've seen him at practice. He looks the part. The only problem is he's got to come up with 25 tickets. He's got 25 family members coming from Hawaii to get to this game. But I think he's a young man that is extremely athletic. Obviously, he's got great size from a school not many people have heard about.
Yeah.
That's going to have a great chance to not just get drafted, but make a football team and have a career.
I hope the family is prepared for the cold weather. I got to tell you, because I live in Southern California. I got off the plane. I'm from the East Coast. My family would be teasing me. It's like 33 degrees, and I'm like, what the heck just happened?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of that initial body shock that's there. Can I throw a name your way, by the way, since we're talking about big fellas? And transformations and stories. There's a tight end who played at Townsend, and actually a really remarkable story. Carter Runyon talked to his head coach, Pete Shinick. This is a guy that was an offensive lineman, 300 pounds in COVID, because there's some correlation here. You mentioned COVID. In COVID, he's like, I don't want to be an offensive lineman. I want to be a tight end. Well, doesn't have an offer. So he goes D3. They get his tape. He moves up to D1, balls out, and all of a sudden has got an opportunity to hear maybe his name called or sign on with the team. So number 80 on the West squad is just another name to throw out there. I love the big fellas, even though I'm not one of them.
Well, those stories are cool.
Yeah.
You know, like the fact Gareth stayed at Lindenwood. He had plenty of chances to leave and go somewhere else, and he leaned into the family atmosphere there at Lindenwood and stayed there, and then you get all kinds of crazy stories that makes this fun.
Yeah, I know you, before we even started the show, I said, hey, like, who are some of those wide receivers? Who are those guys that you really like? There was a kid out of Nebraska that I know caught your attention, Isaiah Nair. Why did you like him?
Well, because when I walked onto the field for the first day of practice, I said, who is that? I mean, he is just long and muscular and just a really good, big-looking wide receiver. Isaiah is a guy that played 1 year of high school football. He was a track athlete. He signed with Wyoming and played really, really well there, and then left and went to Texas, got hurt. Long story short, ended up at Nebraska. And I really think this is a youngster that has some rawness to him, you know, that doesn't have as much experience as maybe some of the quarterbacks that have played a bunch of snaps, but he's got some things you can't teach in terms of size and quickness and fluidity. And I think if he can get somewhere and get a little bit of time to develop the finer things in terms of playing wide receiver, he has a chance to be the kind of guy that everybody's like, where did that guy come from? You know, you're watching him on Sunday, you're like, where is he from again? Because he's got some things that coaches can't teach.
Another guy from UNLV, I want to give you an opportunity to love him up and say what you saw from him in practice in Jackson Woodard.
Yeah, I had seen Jackson Woodard play both at Arkansas and at UNLV, and I knew that he was a good player. I think his tape is exceptional. What I didn't know was what he was going to look like in person, and I was really impressed. He's a much bigger person than I thought maybe he was going to be. Has a great frame. His coaches rave about his leadership ability, about his toughness, his work ethic, and his intelligence. I think this is a guy that, you know, gets on a team and contributes, is a core member of the special teams unit, and then after a couple years is a linebacker that people are talking about across the league.
I actually love that you bring that up, because in all of our coaches' meetings, the amount of players that will get a paycheck from an NFL team because of what they do on special teams, then they weren't asked to do that in college, because you show up in an all-star showcase like this, you're a stud on your team. You weren't necessarily asked to go and play special teams, but a lot of these players are going to make their money, at least starting out on NFL rosters in that role. Just one other note here on one wide receiver. I talked to a staff at San Jose State and Nick Nash. If I would have said to you, Coach, Triple Crown winner in college football, it is Nick Nash out of San Jose State. Not many guys are aware of that. He's a converted quarterback to then wide receiver. When I talked to the staff, they said 2 years ago, dude's just street balling it out there. He's got no idea what he's doing. And then he figured it out. Had them a few times, because San Jose State played some Pac-12 schools, and we had them on the CW. Could not take my eyes off of what he was able to do. When I asked your boy Kyle McCord, who you told us about after practice the other day, I said, hey, Kyle, who's that guy for you? He goes, Nick Nash, pretty good. And so they light up in that regard. Staff obviously loved him up in some of our meetings. So just another name that, and I know you're going to be calling this matchup like you get used to saying number 3 out there on that East squad. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see how some of these guys really are going to manipulate their time here and create a path for them in the NFL. If you had to give one of your guys one piece of advice in a showcase, what do you tell them?
Just go play as hard as you can. Like your job right now is to make sure you know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Because you don't have time to think when you step out on the field. Because this is going to be the fastest game you've ever played in. You know, the speed of this game is going to be faster than anything you've ever been in. So you have to understand exactly what your assignment is so that you can play with the speed of the game.
And you're not just referring to the running clock that we are going to see in both the first half and the second half until we get to the final 2 minutes. They give you the rules when you're calling the game ahead of time, like, oh, I probably should be aware of that, getting ready for the game. So if you're listening to the game, that's why it's moving so fast. Coach, it was awesome to work with you. For Michelle Montaine, Mike Yam with you. Do not forget, you can catch all of the play-by-play Thursday, 8 Eastern Time, the 100th edition of the Shrine Bowl on Channel 84 and 88.
The East West Shrine Bowl Countdown has been a presentation of Bowl Season Radio and First Team Ventures.